Welcome to the Fully Mindful, where we explore what it means to live with intention, creativity, authenticity, and connection. I'm your host, Melissa Chareau, mindfulness and breathwork facilitator, neurodivergent lawyer and coach, and fellow human navigating this wild and beautiful ride we call life. On this podcast, we dive deep with interviews featuring inspiring guests, share solo mini episodes packed with guided mindfulness practices to help you center and thrive, and mix things up with tangents and sidebars, where my friend and fellow podcaster Debbie Harrell from the New World Normal joins me for some real, random, and meaningful conversations. So if you're ready to pause, reflect, and expand, you're in the right place. Let's get fully mindful.
And so these spiritual laws are what I have found to be the most powerful way for me to live with enough balance and equanimity and inner peace that I don't need to get numb, and I don't need the relief that comes with that first vodka tonic. A lot of what I talk about are these 5 spiritual laws, right? So the first has to do with what you focus on grows. Whatever you feed your attention to grows in energy, right? And so it's super important to not only be clear about what you don't want, but to be really clear about what you do want. What's your ideal future self? Yes, we all have wounds and things, and we're in a process of transformation. But there's research that shows that if we have a crystal clear and compelling vision of ourselves in the future, it's actually more powerful over how we comport ourselves today than any trauma that we had in our past.
So the other day, I was at a pub eating lunch with my family, and I overheard a woman at the next table lament to the server, "It's dry January, so no beer, no fun for me." And everyone sort of laughed, me included, but probably for very different reasons. For me, living alcohol-free has led to nothing short of a miraculous life. I thought I was living it up, whooping it up. Alcohol gave me the courage, I thought. I thought I could say things that I really meant, that it made me creative, funny, smart. And all that was true, but it was not alcohol that gave me that. That's just who I was. That's who I am. And it was alcohol that actually covered all that up, kind of chained me up in a cage of my own making. So finding a way to live alcohol-free, that, my friends, was the keys to the kingdom, as they say. That has been responsible for all the happiness, love, joy, and success in my life. And that is what today's guest is here to talk about: living a full, rich, alcohol-free life. Author, coach, and successful entrepreneur Allison, our guest today, is author of Juicy AF, Alcohol-Free. She's an award-winning innovator who helps professional women break their drinking habits and get free from booze, free from shame, free from anxiety. She was a professional success as a senior VP of a global ad agency when she first went alcohol-free. Since then, she increased her income 600%, married the love of her life. She's free of shame, wildly happy. Her book that just came out January 10th, Juicy AF, Stop the Drinking Spiral, Create Your Future, and her course, 30 Days to Freedom for Professional Women, provide a step-by-step guide for high-achieving women. This interview is a game changer, my friends. We talk personal, we talk real, and Kay sets out the 5 spiritual laws from her book, Juicy AF, that guides women to a life that is not only alcohol-free, it's a life that is truly free. Sit back, buckle up, and enjoy this conversation. Well, hey everyone, this is Melissa Chareau with The Fully Mindful, and I'm delighted to be here with my new friend, Allison. She is an amazing person. You're going to find out all about her. She has a book coming out. And in fact, by the time this podcast publishes, it might be perfectly timed because I believe that's January 10th. And her book is called Juicy AF. And before you get all there about the name, it's Juicy Alcohol Free. And so please welcome here tonight, Allison. Thanks for being here, Kay.
Oh, I'm so flattered that we're new friends. I feel the same way. It's
Yeah,
great.
it's fantastic. It's so great to have you here, and I'm excited to talk to you about the work that you do and about your book. But first, let's talk a little bit about you, if that's all right.
Sure. I'm an
Yeah,
open book. Yeah.
you're an open book. So, I mean, in order to get there, I guess we do need to sort of talk a little bit about your book that's coming out on January 10th, GCAF, which is based on your his name.
It absolutely is.
Yeah,
Yep.
and so like tell us a little bit about Juicy AF. What's the whole premise around Juicy AF and how did you arrive at Juicy AF?
Early in my experience of being alcohol free, I walked into a recovery meeting in Chicago, and there was this gorgeous woman at the front of the room who was telling her story. And I knew this woman professionally, which was a little weird. She was a little bit older than I, and beautiful, just gorgeous, beautifully dressed, well put together, articulate. And she was telling this story. She said, it was in my living room with my husband. And then it started to get weird. My boyfriend was there. The police were there, and it was 3 a.m. And I thought it was perfectly normal. she threw back this hair and she laughed. And I remember being viscerally shocked because at the time, I was so new into being alcohol free, and I was buried under, you know, a layer of shame, layer of remorse, regret, embarrassment, and then like wallpaper on top of all those layers that said, nothing to see here, pass on by. And she was so free, she was free of alcohol, but she was free of shame. And all that was left was this sense of sparkling aliveness. And it had never occurred to me that you could live that free. And I wanted that. And today I want to be that and represent that for other women.
Yeah, I love that sparkly aliveness, I think you said. And
Yeah.
that's been my experience. And for those of you, our listeners out there, people know I'm very out there about being alcohol free. I'm a recovering alcoholic, a recovering all kinds of things, a recovering imposterism person, a recovering ADHD person, all kinds of recovery is going on here. And the fascinating thing about recovery, whether that's in 12 step or something else, is that freedom that we get from putting it out all in the open. And I think it's Brene Brown, maybe, if I'm remembering correctly, probably her and probably loads of other fantastic people who have said that if you put shame, if you shine a light on shame, there's no more shame. And it sounds like that's what you experienced in that meeting. When you saw that woman, you identified with her story, and then you saw that she was free of shame and, in fact, was laughing about
Oh
it.
my God. It was stunning to me. It was absolutely stunning. And since then, what I've found is that the freedom from alcohol and the freedom from shame and the freedom from having to pretend that everything is okay freed up so much energy in my life that it totally transformed. I had been a senior vice president at a global ad agency, but within a year, I had started my first $1 million company. Within 3 years, I had started the second one. I was making 600% more than what I had been making. I met and married a guy that I'm still crazy about 20 some odd years later. I mean, my whole world just blossomed into this completely different experience. And it's because I had all this energy that I didn't realize I had been draining.
I'd love to dig into a little bit about that if you are okay with that. I know for me, for instance, when I was not alcohol free, when I was in my cups, as they say in certain circles,
Right.
I wouldn't have thought that it was a problem. It was my solution. It was the thing that I went to that made me feel more relaxed, like I was part of, like I was like everybody else. Like I suddenly had the handbook that everybody else had been given at birth.
Oh my God, I so identify with that. I really do. And that's why I feel that some of the programs that exist that are outside of 12 step that are all about the mechanics, if you will, of stopping drinking, that they don't go far enough. That I really needed a spiritual solution to resolve all the stuff that made alcohol be so ridiculously appealing to me, right? Like it numbed out all the bad stuff. And it made me feel like, you know, a life of magic and possibilities and who knows where the night's going to go was that was the door to that experience. And all of that was super attractive to me. So if I couldn't create a real life full of color and magic and possibility, there's no way that I would be still alcohol free 23 years later.
Yeah, and that's the fascinating part. And for the listeners out there, if you're anything like I was, I thought, and maybe you did too, Kay, that anyone who had a problem with alcohol must be somebody who's living under a bridge. It certainly wasn't somebody who was successful. In my case, I was in school and doing quite well. In your case, you were doing, I'm sure, probably quite well in your life. And, I mean, I guess if you looked really, really hard, you might find some cracks in the porcelain there. But
Yes.
if you kind of looked from afar, things looked pretty all right. And so I think that's kind of comes as a shock that outwardly successful people can really have a problem with this, and that there needs to be some sort of external solution that is just not, oh, just stop drinking. I think that's what you're getting to, right?
It's exactly what I'm getting to. That's why I don't use the word alcoholic,
Mhm.
because no scientist or doctor these days uses that term. It's an old-fashioned term.
It is.
And the perception of what an alcoholic looks like is such an obstacle to people getting help, right? So I thought, going into a 12 step, I thought being in a 12 step program was ruined life. I didn't think drinking and falling down drunk on a dance floor with a client was a ruined life, but I sure thought going to a 12 step program was equaled ruined life. And so I deliberately do not use the word alcoholic. I say I'm alcohol free for exactly that reason.
Let's take a quick break.
Hey, everybody, this is Melissa with the Fully Mindful. It's the new year, and I bet you're feeling the need to unlock your full potential and embrace empowerment, or maybe something completely different. Well, I'm excited to offer a new program with one-on-one breathwork and coaching sessions. We'll embark on a truly transformative journey of self-discovery, combining conscious, connected breathwork and embodiment coaching, and more. So contact me, Melissa, at The Fully Mindful, for your transformative session today. I think that's a really important point that I want to talk a little bit more about, because, and I use the term probably because I've been around 12 step now for decades, maybe more. I've been continuously sober for almost 23 years. It's just a term that is used in 12 step. And it is something that I've heard other versions. Some people will say grateful, recovering alcoholic when they're in a meeting to refer to themselves and those sorts of terms. But I love alcohol free, because I think it imbues what we're aiming for. Not only are we alcohol free, but we're free.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly the point. I find that there are a lot of barriers to people going to AA, which is a shame in a lot of ways. But the labeling yourself an alcoholic, problem number one, have to believe in God, which I know the answer to this, but this is what I'm telling you. Common perception is I have to believe in God, and I don't. And I don't want to go to a church basement. Like there are so many layers of stigma. And I think it's unfortunate, really. One of the traditions in AA, as you know, is anonymity, right? That is the spiritual foundation of all of our traditions. Unfortunately, I think today that adds to the stigma
Yes.
of saying that I need to or I want to be free from alcohol. Where I think in the beginning, the intention was if Joe over here says that he is the spokesperson for AA and he gets drunk, then we've lost our credibility. And 90 years later, whatever, that is no longer the issue, but it's still the tradition. And I just think that being quiet about being alcohol free does a disservice to the people who are struggling and think that they're not so bad that they have to go to AA.
Yeah, I recently did, I'm a lawyer by trade, and I did a continuing legal education presentation recently in my area about substance use disorder and mental health disorders. And essentially, it was all about destigmatizing this. And one of the things that I found was there's an incredible body of research that supports this idea that in order to get people to get help, you have to destigmatize it. And in order to destigmatize these conditions, people need to meet other people who have come out of that, who are in recovery. And they can see, they can identify. And that's a bit impossible when people are anonymous. And again, I understand too, like you do, there's this spiritual tradition and it makes a lot of sense in so many ways. But I do wonder if sometimes it does a disservice. And so, fortunately, you found another way to get the word out. And you have a program that you've offered. I think you focus mostly on women, right?
Do. Yeah. And I mostly focus on professional women.
Right.
I think that most people who are ambitious, overachieving women are driven by a deep sense of insecurity
Mhm.
and feeling like we're not good enough and we don't belong. And so we're going to prove that we are good enough. And we're wildly successful, but we're totally insecure. And alcohol numbs that dissonance
Right.
beautifully. So it makes perfect sense to me that insecure overachievers like me would turn to alcohol. What I have found, Melissa, is that the spiritual laws, the spiritual principles that resolved all that dissonance and discomfort underneath my drinking also catapulted my career success.
Mm.
The level of matter-of-fact honesty when I didn't know something or I was a bad fit for a project or things weren't going well, the ability for me to admit my part in things and make things better, like all of those kind of spiritual laws is directly responsible for my career success.
It's so amazing. And I want to go back a little bit. You were talking about professional women. I know when I was doing some recent research, granted, it was just about lawyers, but I'm assuming it's fairly on par for other professional women, was that for lawyers with alcohol and substance use disorder, they had twice the number of instances of alcohol use disorder as other high stress professions like the medical profession. But then if you parse that out, women had double what the men had. So women were really using alcohol predominantly in order to do exactly that, to be their solution for that insecurity, for that perfectionism, for that imposterism, for all of that anxiety that they might feel but can't communicate because our culture doesn't really provide the tools or the place to do that, right?
Well, the punchline there is drinking actually causes anxiety.
Yes.
I mean, we know this biologically, like it disrupts your sleep,
Mhm.
right? So your cortisol levels go through the roof, which is your stress hormone. We know that it changes your gut biome, which changes your brain chemistry, putting it on more anxious. And there's this mechanism of homeostasis that keeps us in a safe, our body's in a physically safe spot. And so when we drink chronically, and that's 7 drinks a week, doesn't have to be a lot, 7 drinks a week on a regular basis, your body expects that to come on board and ratchets up your anxiety. So when you drink, you don't get so relaxed, your heart forgets to beat. So there are 3 biological mechanisms, each of which produces anxiety. So while I thought it was taking the edge off, what I learned is that it actually helped create that edge.
Isn't that crazy? And you and I are both, I know, fans of the Huberman Lab podcast, and he did a masterclass on alcohol, and it was fascinating. And so if any listeners out there want to learn a little bit more, check out the Huberman Lab podcast on alcohol, because it's astonishing. Like
It really is.
Kind of low to mod. I mean, it's coming from me, low to mod.
Right, exactly. Only 7 drinks a week, that's nothing. Listen to
More
us.
like 7 drinks a day. 7 drinks a week, can cause such incredible damage. In fact, I think one of the studies that he cited said that it was anywhere between 7 to 14% increase in cancer. Cancer.
Yep, it's true.
And it's just astonishing. And even one drink a few hours before bed can disrupt sleep.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great podcast. It really is. It is a masterclass on the biology of alcohol.
And it is astonishing because, I think even today, granted, it's not that typical to have a 2 martini lunch anymore, at least not on the West Coast, maybe still in New York City, I don't know. But it's not that common, but it is really common to go to a happy hour after work, going to a conference with clients and tying one on. And that is really, really common. In fact, it's atypical to have a work-related event without any alcohol at all.
I remember going to one work-related event, and the only non-alcoholic thing they had was tap water in a Dixie cup.
Oh my gosh. Oh, like you're completely singled out if you're no. And we learn these tricks, whether it's 12-step or through some other program or just on our own, going to events. And I think I usually order some kind of sparkling soda and throw a lime in it. And then you don't get asked, because some people get really insistent. Some people get really uncomfortable when you're not drinking, even if you're completely comfortable with it.
In my book, I have scripts for 7 sticky situations.
I love it.
How rude is it to ask somebody why they're not drinking? The question is, why are you, Anyway, and the scripts range from deflecting to sassy to, what I've found is in those situations, if I have a one-liner that I've memorized, I'm good. But if I don't have a one-liner, I'm like a deer in the headlights.
Right. So I guess your message is that it's really important to have that fallback, whatever it is.
Absolutely. To be prepared, right, for those kinds of situations. Make sure you've got your own transportation so you can leave when you get uncomfortable. Go early so the host sees you, and leave early. There are all kinds of tricks that set you up for success.
Right. And you can still have a good time. You can still meet with clients or other business colleagues that will be helpful for your career, but you don't have to drink about it.
Right.
Yeah. What's one of your favorites scripts that you've used, whether it's in your book or not?
Yeah. My favorite one is if somebody asks, why aren't you drinking? My favorite thing to say is, when I drink, my clothes fall off.
Yes. And then what kind of reaction do you typically have?
Everything from, well, that sounds pretty good to me, to, oh God.
Yeah, I think one of my favorites is I will usually say something like, oh, I've had enough to drink for my whole life. And then I just kind of dismiss it, or, oh, I'm just not drinking right now. And right now it just happens to have lasted 23 years.
Right. I had a business partner that I knew professionally, but we didn't know each other well personally. And he was like, you don't drink ever? I'm like, I had a problem with it when I was younger, and so I quit. Period. I didn't need to go into a song and dance. And even if you've only been alcohol free for a day, You were younger 2 days ago, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like you said, it's not really anyone's business, but if you feel like sharing a little bit, you can. And that's, I think, just sharing in a general way, like you did in that instance, is perfect, right? You're being honest. You are kind of overcoming the shame there by saying, "Hey, it was a problem for me, so I quit, and now here I am, and
Yeah.
I'm empowered." Is what that demonstrates to me.
Yeah. Nobody needs a song and dance.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And so, what are some of the other tools in your book and in your practice do you help women with for being alcohol free and living in a happy, joyous, and free life?
So a lot of what I talk about are these five spiritual laws, right?
Mhm.
So the first has to do with what you focus on grows. Whatever you feed your attention to grows in energy, right? And so it's super important to not only be clear about what you don't want, but to be really clear about what you do want. What's your ideal future self? Yes, we all have wounds and things, and we're in a process of transformation. But there's research that shows that if we have a crystal clear and compelling vision of ourselves in the future, it's actually more powerful over how we comport ourselves today than any trauma that we had in our past. So it's so important to be clear about, what do you want to see when you wake up in the morning? Is it the Eiffel Tower? Is it a horse? What conversations do you want to be in? How do you want to handle adversity? To be really, really crystal clear about who and how you want to be in the future. So that's really number one.
I love that so much because I'm not hearing you say, law of attraction, what I think becomes real in some way. What you're saying is be really clear. And the more focused and clear you are, the more likely you're going to take action in order to achieve those things and to be in those circles of people, to get to the Eiffel Tower, to do the things that are going to get you there. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, because the second part of that exercise is, what habits does that future self embody?
Mhm.
What networks of people is she around? How does she take care of herself? How does she deal with her fear? And then let's pick one of those things and start doing it today. And so in 12 step, we spend a lot of time looking at where we're wrong.
Mhm.
What I've found as a woman is that just makes me even more insecure. Like, I think for guys, that ego deflation makes a ton of sense. But for women, we walk in so wounded that to keep telling ourselves we're selfish and resentful, it just makes it worse. And so if I can say, hey, I'm working on this one habit of tracking all the food I eat 5 days a week, because that's my ideal future self. That's what she does to be fit. Great. I'm going to start doing that one thing. And then I'm going to remind myself, hey, you know what? You're doing a good job with that. Well done. Well done, you. Like,
Yeah.
for the women that are like me, I need to be focusing on progress, not constantly reminding myself where I'm wrong, which is the second spiritual law, by the way, progress. And
Progress. Let's talk about progress.
right, it's also about what you think about grows. And so it really is a journal way to be able to track, I did this really well. And for the things I didn't do well, if I could rewind the tape and replay that, what are 10 things I could have done differently?
Mhm.
Okay, next time I'm in that kind of situation, I'm going to experiment with this one and see what I learned from that. So it's more about, I'm using my life as a series of experiences that I'm going to learn from, rather than I was good, I was bad.
I really like this because it seems to me anyway that your program, your book is very nuts and bolts. You don't just come up with these spiritual principles, you actually show women how to do it.
Exactly.
This is how you are going to focus on your growth. This is how you're going to make progress. These little experiments and these data points and these reassessments. And I like how you make it joyful too. Like, even where
Thanks.
we made mistakes, okay, it didn't go well. Why didn't it go well? What could we do differently? We could look at this as a little bit of an experiment. Next time I'm going to try A, B, or C and see what happens, see how I.
Mhm. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I even created for people that order the book early, they'll get a workbook along with it, a printed 58-page workbook that all of these exercises that I'm alluding to are right there for you. It's a super easy thing to do.
I love that. So what's
So
third principle?
the next one is that our old stories are our operating system,
Mm,
and that we can look kind of at the surface of what creates turbulence for us, and there are ways to go down and finally get to that old story. And some of them are, I'm a victim, I'm helpless. Mine is, I'm not good enough. Another one of mine is, I am not worthy of being noticed. For many women, it's everybody else has to be happy before I'm happy.
mm,
Like there are some themes with high achieving women that we hear, I've seen a lot over and over again. And so I've got tools for people to be able to get down to those stories. And then the next spiritual principle or law is to actually substitute a character value or a principle for that old story. So when I'm in a place of, oh my God, I'm terrified, I'm going to get ignored, the spiritual principle that I substitute is compassion and honesty and kindness to myself. And so it gives me a roadmap. It's kind of like the equivalent of the eat this, not that diet. Instead of being focused on how inadequate you are, let's practice some compassion. Let's practice some amusement. Let's practice some gentle honesty, right? And it gives me that roadmap for what to substitute for these old ideas that I keep punishing myself with.
I like that too, because I think there's probably neuroscience to back this, that as we start those new habits, we lay down these new neural pathways. We don't even have to necessarily worry about the old ones because the new ones just go right over. They pave
Yep.
right over. And I was listening to, I think he was a nutrition expert, and he was talking about a similar principle in nutrition, which is instead of thinking, what foods don't I eat, think of all the foods that you do want to eat. And chances are, if you start eating all of the foods that you are quote unquote supposed to eat, the ones that are healthy for you, you're not going to have room in your life for the ones that aren't. And
Exactly.
it's the same principle as what
It
I'm
is.
doing.
It is. It was Dostoevsky who said, set upon yourself the task of not thinking about a polar bear, and you will find yourself thinking about the damn thing every minute.
Well, it's 100% true. I mean, we all know this. The second we start thinking about, a particular shirt that we saw or a car that we want to buy, next thing you know, you see that wherever you are. And it doesn't matter if we like it or dislike it. Think about it and it's just going to appear everywhere. I think I read we have something like 60,000 thoughts a day. We just don't pay attention to most of them. And so it's calling into consciousness those positive, those more fulfilling, those more satisfying experiences that we can decide to pay attention to. And it sounds like that's the work that you're offering people.
Yep. And then the last one is that we forgive to free ourselves.
Say more about that.
Well, forgiving somebody else is not letting them off the hook.
Mhm.
It's letting you off the hook, you know?
Yeah, what do you mean by that?
Well, to back up and give a teeny bit of context, I drank because I had this edge. I was so uncomfortable in my own skin that I needed the relief that came with actually just the sound of the cork pulling out of the bottle. And so if I'm to live in a way where I don't need that relief, there has to be a way for me to live that I don't develop that edge. And so these spiritual laws are what I have found to be the most powerful way for me to live with enough balance and equanimity and inner peace that I don't need to get numb and I don't need the relief that comes with that first vodka tonic, right? So forgiveness, what I've found is that, I mean, there are people that have hurt us. There are people that have hurt us. There are people who have wronged us. There are. But what I found is that if I carry them around in my head, if they are in my energetic space, if I harbor that harm and how resentful I am about it, it's the edge. I'm eventually going to need some peace. I'm going to need some relief from that. And how am I going to do that? And I have found forgiveness to be such a powerful tool to get that sense of inner peace. Are people jerks sometimes? Absolutely. They are, people are selfish and mean-spirited and irritated, and God knows we're all overwhelmed and have been terrified for our lives for almost 3 years, right? So we're not on our best behavior. And if I can find ways to forgive the people that have harmed me, it's for my benefit. It truly is not for them.
Hey, everybody, if you like this conversation, make sure to rate the show in Apple or Spotify or wherever you are listening so that others can find it and enjoy it too. And if you like the show and want to keep hearing great conversations with really interesting people about how they found their purpose, please donate to the show. Go to thefullymindful.com to donate today. So what is one way that you've used in order to forgive someone? Maybe not the biggest one that you've ever had to forgive, but, a fairly sizable wrong that was done to you. What did you do to forgive the person?
I really asked myself 2 questions. One is, how was I complicit in creating those situations? Where did I make decisions where I encouraged the attention of an inappropriate relationship, or I didn't say, this is my boundary, because it takes 2, right? It takes 2. And realizing that I played a part in encouraging a situation that turned around and cut me off at the knees makes me, I don't know exactly psychically or psychologically how this works, but all of a sudden I have to take some responsibility, and it's not all that other person's fault, right? So it kind of makes that smoke screen of blaming somebody else kind of dissipate, because I did play a part. So I found that super, super helpful. And the second thing is, I'll be damned if I want those people determining my mood. I want to have seniority over my inner experience. I don't want somebody else that I don't like having seniority over my inner experience. And so, in a funny way, forgiving because I want to be in control of my own emotional space makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, there's a practice, and I wonder what you think of it. In 12-step, I think the suggestion is to pray for another person. In Buddhism or in mindfulness circles, it's perhaps can be achieved through the metta practice. So meditating on wishing somebody safety and health and well-being and an easeful life. Are those practices that you've used as well?
Absolutely. And what I realized from doing that is, if that other person really were whole and happy and prosperous, they wouldn't be acting the way they're acting.
So you develop some compassion for the other person in that process.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you get to see and witness their humanity.
Yeah. One of the women I work with loves dogs. She's just crazy about dogs. And to her, the wag of a dog's tail is the signal that God is. And so when people bug her, she thinks of them as wounded puppies that are in a humane society and kennel, and that they're just acting out because they're wounded in some way. They're rescue dogs, you know? And
Yeah.
just it's her, because that lands with her, that became her way to be able to develop that sense of compassion.
What a beautiful metaphor, analogy. I'm not sure what the right word is there, but it's a beautiful image. And I'm sure every person can come up with their own analogy of a wounded dog or a wounded bird or a sick person or whatever the case may be. I love how by viewing where you might be complicit, you are then becoming more human too, and identifying with the humanness of the other person. Like, oh, we
Yeah,
were both in this together. We're both human. We made a mistake. And it takes the edge out of some difficult forgiveness work when you're like, you know what, I was in that sandbox too. And here's my part. Yeah, yeah, maybe the other person still has a bigger part, whatever. But maybe they're a wounded dog.
yeah,
And maybe if I treat them with some kindness, if nothing else, I am free.
that's right.
Yeah.
Plus, there's this little sense of superiority that,
Let's be real.
I mean, I'm just going to tell you, when I send my ex-husband and his wife baskets of food for Christmas when my older kids are there, I do feel kind of proud of myself, I must admit.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, to that end, and one of the ways this podcast is sort of going for this new season, this new year, and this is perfect timing, is how do we incorporate our own spirituality, whether that's a religion or some other spiritual practice, into our everyday life? And what I'm hearing is that's all Juicy AF is all of these spiritual principles with really nuts and bolts work that you work with women on a daily basis, whether that's one on one or in a group or giving talks, presentations, all of those things. But what do you do personally for you
Um,
about spirituality in your everyday life?
oh, it's such a great question. I really am very um, vigilant about the way I start my day. I roll out of bed onto my knees and I always say a prayer to what or who or whatever force. I don't even really know or care, but it is a prayer of thank you for allowing me another day of being alcohol free and help me do my life's mission work today. And I do that before I go in the bathroom. Like I roll out of bed onto my knees. It's just the way I start every day. And then I always read something that's inspiring or spiritual. I always either take notes on that and or journal. And then I've had a meditation practice for 30 something years at this point. And um, and so I meditate. It just, I think the thing that I like, what the practice that I'm into right now is really using visualization tools. And I really love the idea of imagining that there's a cord that goes from my sits bones down into the center of the earth. And it just release everything that no longer serves me gets released down that cord. And oh, just the visceral sense of relief, you know. And then I imagine that I have this giant golden sun over my head. That's one of my spiritual principles, might be amusement, might be calm, might be gratitude, might be forgiveness. And that just comes in through the crown of my head and goes down past the back of my eyes and down my throat and down my chest and my abdomen and my hips. Oh, you know what I mean? And it just squeegees out all the stuff that isn't that.
I love how you demystified meditation, right? It doesn't have to be this, and that's sort of my life's mission, I think, is to demystify meditation because for whatever reason, and I think I did too, many people believe that it has to be this very formal practice, that it means you have no thoughts, that, somehow you've become a monk somewhere in a cave. And of course, it means none of that because we're human and we think, and that's part of our everyday life. And I love how instead of trying to move thought out, you're actually using your beautiful mind to create these images that make you feel better. You probably behave better in your daily
Seriously.
life because you've done that practice.
Yeah, I started with Zen meditation. So I started with the full lotus and the, robe and the whole, I started there.
And it's a beautiful practice for those who can do it.
And the beauty of meditation for me is, well, you've seen the inner workings of clocks, right? There are these gears that have teeth that fit together. And what happens when I think is I have these gears that are all enmeshed with each other, and one gear is turning another gear that's turning. I mean, it just gets super complicated up in there. And what I love about meditation, even if it's counting my exhales for 30 seconds, is it disengages those gears. And it just gives me enough of a perspective change that I can actually think about my thinking rather than being caught in my thinking. And I agree with you. I have heard people say, well, I can't quiet my mind enough to meditate. It's like, well, no, it doesn't work like that. You meditate to quiet your mind, you don't have to get there first.
Yeah,
But
and you don't even need to quiet it. I mean, I think that's a byproduct, but it's certainly not necessarily the goal or anything. It's being aware, it's being present, and that
yeah,
includes being present for the thought, seeing the thought, but not like, I loved how you said that, not sort of getting hooked onto it, being disentangled from the thought, having perspective, having room, having that space. I remember in 12 step, they talk about having the pause, right? For those who are listening, you're like, what are you talking about? It's pausing before agitated or doubtful, asking for the next right action, right? And so for me, for I think it was 18 or 19 years of being alcohol free, that pause eluded me. I don't know if it's my ADHD or just my own brand of recovery or whatever. I'm just a slow learner. But I remember the day that I got that pause, and I had been a practicing meditator for decades at that time as well. And it was like, oh, this is it. This is space, the final frontier. This is the never ending voyage, right? To get a little Star Trek nerdy. But that's what we're aiming for, is just having that space, right?
yeah, exactly. Just a little breath before you decide where you're going to go next.
Yeah, I love that. So I love how you are incorporating all of your spiritual practices in your everyday life. And then it also happens to be your work. And so
Mhm.
tell us a little bit about what your work looks like these days.
Well, right now I'm focused solely on the book, but I do have a mastermind of a group of really high performing women who are all alcohol free. And I also do some coaching.
Mhm.
So I work with women who are already alcohol free, who are entrepreneurs or senior level executives. And we work with these spiritual laws. How do you apply them like all the way through your life, not just when you're thinking about being alcohol free? And then I have a 30-day course for executive women who want to take a break, from drinking. So it's a lot of coaching and creating courses and promoting the book right now.
Yeah. And so the book, Juicy AF comes out January 10th. And I think you said early purchasers are able to get a workbook, a 58-page
58
workbook.
page workbook and a cute little journal too.
And I mean, I think this is such a fabulous program because of the spiritual laws that you incorporate into them, and because of the nuts and bolts. And so, where are people going to be able to find this book of yours?
Well, juicyaf.life is the website, and /book. That's the way to get the bundle of the book and the workbook and the journal. It will also be available on Amazon, like everything else in the world.
You could probably find, yeah, I don't even know what you could find. If there's anything that you can't find on Amazon, I'd be interested.
My daughter has hermit crabs. I'm like, what are you going to do when it needs a bigger shell? She goes, oh, you can buy them on Amazon.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy. And so, one of the things I guess I'm interested in, and I don't know, maybe this is something for offline, I don't know, but is do you ever give any talks to companies or organizations about how they can support people in being alcohol free and how this is actually really good for their organization?
I absolutely do. My first entrepreneurial company, I helped Fortune 200 firms create their next $100 million platforms. It's a lot of numbers, but I helped big companies come up with their new products or their new brands. And so I'm so comfortable in that environment. Like those are my people. I'm very comfortable in those environments. So yes, absolutely. That is on the to-do list for 2023.
I think you and I are on the same mission there because, the way that I see it, and we talked about this earlier in the interview, is this is not just a personal problem. This is a culture problem, a systemic problem. We live and work in a culture that elevates the use of alcohol. And I'm not slamming alcohol. Do your good things, have fun with it. If I could, I would.
Exactly.
It's that this elevation of alcohol use to the point where it becomes a problem. It becomes odd if you don't drink alcohol, that sort of thing. And so I'm really interested in getting through to these systems and incorporating wellness so that corporations and organizations can support people and elevate being alcohol free.
Do you know that more people in America have never had a drink than there are African Americans? 15% of the adult US population has never tasted alcohol. 15%, 13% of our population is African American. So think about it from equity and inclusivity standpoint as well.
Yeah.
Like how much do we put into making sure that ethnic minorities are represented at all the levels of the organization? Less well than it should be.
Right.
But think about the population that doesn't drink being even bigger than that, and nobody talks about it. It's kind of mind-boggling.
That's fascinating. That's fascinating. So we're on the same mission. I think that's
I think
wonderful.
we really are.
Well, one thing I would like to, I guess, maybe end on a little bit here is looking back, it's been 23 years for you and almost 23 for me. 23 for you, which I think is awesome. I don't know how we managed to connect, but there we are. So 23 years ago, what would you tell yourself, the person just before who stepped into that first meeting or that first inclination to be alcohol free? What would you tell her?
I was fighting so hard to keep alcohol in my life. I think that if someone had said to me, just experiment with being alcohol free for 60 days, it would have been less of a hurdle to jump over.
Yeah.
Just come and experiment for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. Because by the time I was a month, 2 months, 3 months away from drinking, my life already was so much better. It just was so inconceivable to me that a life without alcohol wouldn't be dry and boring and heinous. I wish that I could have shown a snapshot of what life is like today, because It's so much more magical and full than anything I could have imagined for myself.
Yeah, it is amazing how we would have sold ourselves short, really, really short.
Yep.
The limited vision that we had back then with what is actually possible in a very short period of time.
It's
30,
very true.
90 days. It is amazing. It is, I think, nothing short of miraculous what can happen to a woman who is alcohol free and doing the work that you've suggested, even just a little piece of it, how transformative that really can be.
It is the ultimate hack. It
Yeah.
is the ultimate hack. You don't have to work so hard. Really, you don't have to work so hard. Get free from alcohol. And I promise you, everything gets better. Your skin looks better. Your demeanor is better. Your relationships are better. Your work is better. You're healthier. It's just the ultimate life hack. And if you don't believe me, try it.
Right, do the little experiment. And this is for anyone. You don't have to have a problem with alcohol in order to be
Nope.
alcohol free. You can
Nope.
just try this experiment and see what happens. You could maybe you only drink 2 drinks a week. Good on you. Try a little experiment, see what it's like if you don't at all. And try these spiritual principles on and see what happens. See how your life transforms.
Yeah,
It will
it's
be
really
nothing
too.
short of miraculous.
I love it. So true.
Well, thank you so much, Kay. I can't wait for people to get a hold of your book and your workbook and hear you speak when you speak on the big stage. I know it's only a matter of time before you're on that TED stage.
Thanks, Melissa.
No, I mean, I've heard you say this and I'm with you. We are the weirdos who love to talk and we love amazing, amazing life that can happen being alcohol free.
Amen.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Kay. And I hope to have you on in another, I don't know, who knows when, after your first TED Talk.
I would love that. Thanks, Melissa.
All right. Thank you. We'll see you soon. Hey, everybody. If you like this conversation and are looking to align your work and life with your purpose or uncover your purpose in the first place, work with me. I coach people ready to uncover and appreciate their worth, make an impact, and find meaning and purpose in the work they do, whether that's personal or professional work. Get your mind right and make your plan for impact and coach with me. Connect with me for 15 or 20 at the Calendly link in the show notes below and talk about coaching with me. Hey everybody, it's Melissa, and I'm wondering if you all can relate. Have you ever caught yourself procrastinating or maybe doubting your abilities, or maybe you have a black belt inner critic like I do or have had that wants to sabotage your every move with judgment and perfectionism expectations? It might keep you stuck, it might keep you anxious and away from your full potential. The Positive Intelligence Program, PQ, is a powerful 6-week journey designed to help you quiet those saboteurs, embrace positivity, and find flow in your life. Through daily practices and weekly focuses, we'll work together to build your mental fitness. The PQ app will guide you every step of the way and support you, and you'll be supported either by myself in a one-on-one or in a small group of like-minded individuals where you can share insights and progress. So reach out, contact me at info@thefullymindful.com to find out how we can work together one-on-one or in a small group today.